We hear the names Romney, Perry, and Kaine all the time. Today, we'll talk about Bachmann, Gingrich, Huntsman, and Paul. This is the CitizenLink Report. I'm Stuart Shepard along with Tom Minnery, the Executive Director of CitizenLink. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Stuart.
Tom, people can follow the horse race coverage of the presidential contenders on any mainstream news media channel. That's why we've tried to stay focused on where they stand on the issues, particularly the issues of interest to conservative Christian voters. So today we want to talk, in the past we've talked about Mitt Romney and Rick Perry and Herman Cain and Rick Santorum. We've either talked about them or featured them. So today we wanted to give some time to Bachmann, Huntsman, Perry, Gingrich, and Paul.
Right.
So first, U.S. Representative Michele Bachmann.
Congresswoman Bachmann, close friend, wonderfully pro-life, pro-family, pro-marriage, head of the Tea Party caucus in the House of Representatives, which tells me something else about the Tea Party. There are a lot of social conservatives, not just fiscal conservatives, in the Tea Party. The fact that they would embrace her as their leader indicates that very strongly. The downside of Congresswoman Bachmann, unfortunately, is that she is in the House of Representatives. It is very difficult to launch a national reputation that would qualify one as a presidential candidate from the House of Representatives. I don't know that it has been done before, certainly not in the 20th century, much less the 21st century, of course. And she has a difficult road, but she says all the right things, and she's an excellent speaker. I'm proud of her when she speaks at the debates because she's articulate, she's reasonable, and she's very forceful.
And she's very strong on the issues that we tend to care about.
That's right. As I mentioned, on the marriage issue, she's a bulwark of support for traditional marriage, thoroughgoing pro-lifer, wonderful family story. Back in Minnesota, her husband and she, in addition to raising their own kids, have raised more than 20 foster kids coming through their house. So just a delightful family background and a very engaging campaigner. It's just that the House of Representatives as her primary platform probably is not going to be enough.
And we're going to hear that, I think, echoed here a couple of more times as we go through the names on the list here. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich is lately doing okay in the polls, starting to show up a little bit. Also an excellent speaker and historian.
Well, he is. I think that he is probably, intellectually speaking, the most brilliant lineup of Republican Party candidates this time around. Professorial history professor background, has done a whole lot of work digging out the Christian history of the country and understanding the Judeo-Christian roots of the United States of America. It's wonderful for him to do that. There's something called temperament, presidential temperament. Ideally, a president ought to build coalitions, build people around him, build a movement. And when one is the smartest guy in the room, sometimes it's hard to put up with people who aren't so smart. And I would put myself in that regard. I remember very clearly when Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House back in the 90s. He used to meet with pro-family leaders at a particular gathering once a year with the House leadership. And I remember we were going back and forth on one difficult issue, and finally he threw up his hands and he said, well, maybe it's just too difficult for us to lead. Maybe we got to just go back, being in the minority, and we can say anything we want because it won't make any difference. Maybe it's just too difficult.
Well, there you go.
At that point, we needed somebody to pull people together and encourage cooperation and encourage what common understanding there was, rather than simply to throw up one's hands and to do that. Now, earlier this year, there was a stunning development in Speaker Gingrich's campaign. Most of his senior leadership team left, and I know a couple of those guys. And I am not sure whether it was interference from Newt's wife or this temperament thing, but at any rate, a lot of good people left that staff. Now, obviously, he's still campaigning, so he's undoubtedly got other staff, and that's a good thing. But I wonder about that. He has wounded himself among pro-family people because he is now on his third marriage, and the circumstances surrounding the first two are not good. And for those of us who believe that marriage is sacrosanct and marriage ought to be permanent, even though many times it is not, for someone to be on his third marriage, I've had many reporters ask me that question. How could you say anything nice about Newt Gingrich because he has disappointed you so much on that issue that is so fundamental to you, the issue of marriage? And it's a hard question to answer. And so Newt has distanced himself from a lot of people on that regard. He's pro-life, social conservative otherwise, but it's the personal qualities that are a hindrance. Nonetheless, on any given debate night, he's the most brilliant guy in the room, and it's fun to listen to him.
It's been interesting to listen to the various pundits because he has snapped at some of the questioners on the debates that we've seen, and perhaps rightfully so. Some have praised him for that. Others have criticized him heavily for that and said you just kind of need to play the game and go along. It all depends, I think, on our own temperament and how we perceive that particular reaction that he takes to people. Former Governor of Utah, Jon Huntsman.
Well, an unusual candidate to get in. He's running toward the middle at a time when a lot of the candidates are trying to establish themselves as the conservative. It's interesting now, this is the year of conservatism as opposed to President Obama's left-leaning liberalism. Jon Huntsman is trying to stake out that ground in the middle. I don't think he's going to get there. He is personally pro-life. As you mentioned, former governor of Utah. He left that job in 2009, became ambassador to China in the Obama administration. He did sign some pro-life bills in Utah. Let me follow my notes pretty closely here. Legislation to make second trimester abortions illegal, fetal pain legislation, and a bill that would create a legal defense fund to pay for litigation related to lawsuits that abortion advocates file against state legislation. A little bit complicated there. Seems to be pro-life. Would say he's pro-marriage, but he has embraced the idea of civil unions, which is a middle ground position that's really not open to him because advocates on the left advocate for same-sex marriage. Even those states that have very strong civil union laws, like California, that's not sufficient. They will want to go to the next step for same-sex marriage. So the middle ground on the marriage issue has been taken away from him. He's got to decide yes or no on same-sex marriage. He would say no, but he would advocate civil unions, but they would push him in the direction of same-sex marriage, to be sure. So a moderate Republican candidate who does a good job during the debates.
I've noticed on the talent-oriented reality shows, you know, America's Got Talent and Dancing with the Stars and that sort of thing, they always tend to save the act that gets the most attention for last. They always try to feature that one. I've placed U.S. Representative Ron Paul here, perhaps not so much for him as for his supporters. They are vocal, and they're a party waiting to happen.
Did you say Ron Paul's been on Dancing with? I must have missed that episode.
Didn't exactly say that.
Yeah. Libertarianism, the idea that government should keep its hands off people. That's not us. We are social conservatives. We believe, for example, that the right to life for the least of these is the province of the federal government. And although Congressman Paul is pro-life, he does not want the federal government involved in abortion because he believes that states have the right to determine this as they want. Now, either you believe that unborn children, preborn children are persons or you don't. And if you do, then it seems to me you would acknowledge that government has a right and a duty to protect those preborn lives. And he would want the federal government out of it. He would also remove jurisdiction over abortion from federal judges, believing that they have no right to rule on that, thereby leaving these decisions really to the states. Because of his libertarian stance, his pro-life voting record over the years in Congress has been a little bit mixed, as I say, because he's libertarian as well. Yeah. He voted against restricting interstate transportation of minors who get abortions, but he voted in favor of banning partial birth abortion. We appreciate that. He supports banning taxpayer funds being used for abortion and supports defunding Planned Parenthood. Now, so you never quite know what you get from somebody who takes a libertarian screen over their issues. On the other issues that he is so insistent about, ending the Federal Reserve, abolishing the IRS. We plainly do not have expertise to sit here and tell viewers whether those are good ideas or not. And so we're not going to probably talk too much about Ron Paul because we're not the people to go for expertise on whether the Fed should be involved or whether the IRS should be involved. And he is an isolationist in foreign policy, bring all the troops home. In fact, he advocated on one of the recent debates that we should just cut the electricity to the air conditioning units off. That will bring the troops out of Afghanistan. That's really a unpresidential kind of thing to say. The other thing to be said about Ron Paul, and there's a phenomenon, he excites a certain slice of the electorate, generally younger people. They can become unruly at those venues at which Ron Paul is speaking. You and I both experienced the shouts, the catcalls, the unruly behavior that often attends those followers of Ron Paul who could probably do better for their candidate by being a little nicer when they're there to listen to the candidate. Now, having said that, they are very energetic.
Yeah.
They packed the Value Voters Summit just a few weeks ago to vote for Ron Paul, which is why he prevailed at the Values Voter Summit.
And then they left.
Then they left, not really interested in the full realm of social conservatism there. So
Right.
There they are, and it's a rich mix of candidates. As I said before, I've never before seen a lineup of candidates for a particular party that are so articulate, strong, and able to slice and dice the opposition as are these candidates.
I found it interesting. I was looking at, I know we try to stay away from the polls, but the latest CBS New York Times poll shows Herman Cain at the lead, but the haven't decided or don't know beats practically all of the candidates. So you have 8 of them, but yet here at the bottom of the poll, if you look, most people just really haven't, or not most, but many people just really haven't decided yet.
Well, that's right, and I think this will shift back and forth, but there's not a whole lot of time now with the Iowa caucus having advanced their caucus date to early January. It's going to come to a skidding halt pretty soon.
Now, what needs to happen? I mean, I think most people would agree that there needs to be fewer selections as we move forward to help people try to lock in, but that's a tough thing to suggest to happen. I mean, it's going to be up to the candidates to do that.
Well, it is, and candidates love the idea of national television to propound their issues and to give an account for who they are and what they stand for. And as long as candidates can continue to get that minimum percentage of support in the polls, then those who sponsor the debates will continue to allow them to appear at those debates. And so I think we're going to see 5, 6, 7 of these candidates continue on into midwinter.
Okay. Hey, I mentioned Herman Cain just a second ago. I did want to give you a chance to talk about last week when he gave some answers on the questions about abortion and particularly the exceptions in the law to abortions that were a little muddying of the issue. Tell us your opinion on that and what you think about it.
He says he is consistently pro-life. And then a CNN interviewer said, what so many secular news media interviewers say, what about rape and incest? They go right to that small, very difficult exception. And Herman Cain said, I would not want to give a directive about what people need to believe. I would want that decision to be open to the parents, the mother herself, the physician. Even though I'm president, I'm not going to be giving national directives. He used that word directive. And so a lot of people said, wow, he's backed way off. He's given the traditional liberal view of abortion. I'm personally opposed, but I'm not going to impose my views on anybody else.
Yeah.
I don't think he was talking about that. I think he was talking only about exceptions for rape and incest in abortions. And rape and incest pregnancies account for less than 1%. And I should say rape and incest abortions account for less than 1% of all abortions. So that very narrow exception is what he was talking about, but he put out a follow-up statement reaffirming his consistent pro-life stance. So we got to give him the benefit of the doubt. When he gets more experience at responding to these tricky gotcha questions, then he'll do better, I think.
All right. Tom, thank you for your insights. It's been very helpful to hear you kind of lay out the table for us so we can understand who's who in this race. Thank you for watching. We appreciate all your comments and your emails. We don't get to answer all of them, but we do read every one that comes in. We appreciate hearing from you. Your questions, your praises, your criticisms of what we do here. You may always write to us at mail@citizenlink.com. Remember to pray for the candidates, but also pray for yourself as you try to make a decision among all of the folks who are running for president this year on both sides of the aisle, as you try to figure out who would be best to lead this country. And remember, stand tall and be heard.